Why did Gandalf spend decades preparing a strategy that he never fully explained to anyone, not even to Elrond or Galadriel? The answer will change how you see the entire War of the Ring. Hello everyone, I'm Turian. Welcome to the Codex of Realms channel, where we explore the most fascinating fantasy universes in details you never imagined. If that sounds interesting, there's a subscribe button somewhere around here that you can hit. When we read The Lord of the Rings, we mainly follow the Hobbits' perspective, but there's something happening behind the scenes that Tolkien only subtly suggests. Gandalf isn't simply reacting to events as they unfold, he's executing an elaborate plan that began decades before Bilbo found the ring. What's most intriguing is that he never reveals this plan completely to anyone, not even to his closest allies. Why? Because the plan depended on something he couldn't guarantee would happen, the fundamental goodness of hobbits. To understand this, we need to go back to the year 2941 of the Third Age, when Gandalf organizes Bilbo's journey with the dwarves. On the surface, it seems like he's just helping Thorin reclaim Erebor, but there's much more happening. Gandalf already suspected that the necromancer in Dol Guldur was Sauron and knew that war was approaching. He needed allies, and more importantly, he needed to understand the true nature of the ring that Bilbo had found. But here's the crucial detail that many readers miss. Gandalf didn't send Bilbo just to help the dwarves. He sent him to be tested. You see, Gandalf had observed hobbits for years. He knew their nature, resistant to corruption, their simplicity, and their capacity to do what's right even when it's difficult. But he needed to be sure. Bilbo's journey was in part a test to see if a hobbit could carry a ring of power without being completely corrupted by it. And Bilbo passed the test. He had the ring for 60 years and still managed to give it up voluntarily, something only a few people in all of Middle-earth could do. Now here's where it gets really interesting. When Gandalf finally confirmed that Bilbo's ring was indeed the One Ring, he didn't rush to tell the White Council immediately. He spent 17 years planning and preparing, and during this time he was doing much more than just researching the ring. He was positioning pieces on the chessboard. First, he ensured that Aragorn continued his activities as a ranger, gaining experience in leadership and combat, but also that he remained away from Minas Tirith, where he could be recognized prematurely. Gandalf knew that Aragorn would be crucial in the coming war, but he needed the right moment to reveal him. Second, he maintained close contact with the elves, particularly with Elrond, but interestingly, he never revealed all the details of what he was planning. Even at the Council of Elrond, Gandalf presents the facts, but not his complete plan. But the most ingenious aspect of Gandalf's plan was something he could never explain to anyone because it depended on factors beyond his control. He was betting on the fundamental nature of hobbits, and more specifically, he was betting that Frodo would make choices that Gandalf couldn't force him to make. Gandalf's plan depended on Frodo voluntarily choosing to destroy the ring, even knowing it would mean his own destruction. Here's where many people misinterpret Gandalf's strategy. They think he had a detailed step-by-step plan, but actually he had something much more sophisticated. He had an adaptive plan based on fundamental principles about the nature of good and evil. Gandalf understood that evil, by its very nature, destroys itself. Sauron, being fundamentally selfish and megalomaniacal, couldn't conceive that someone would voluntarily destroy power when they had it within their grasp. That's why the plan worked. Gandalf wasn't betting on chance, he was betting on the predictable nature of evil and the less predictable, but historically consistent, nature of hobbit goodness. He knew that if he could put the ring in the right hands, and if he could get those people to Mordor, there was a real chance that good would triumph, not because it would be stronger, but because it would be wiser. But there's more. Gandalf was also counting on something he couldn't directly control: providence, or as Tolkien called it, Eru Ilúvatar. Gandalf, being a Maya, had a deeper understanding of how the world works than any mortal. He understood that there were forces at play, greater than any military or political strategy. Gollum's role in the ring's destruction wasn't accident, it was providence, but a providence that could only work if the right conditions were created. And those conditions included Bilbo and Frodo's pity for Gollum. Look how elaborate this is. Gandalf knew that Bilbo had spared Gollum's life, and he instructed Frodo to do the same. Not because he knew exactly how Gollum would be important, but because he understood that pity creates possibilities that cruelty doesn't create. When Frodo shows mercy to Gollum, he's not just being kind, he's creating the conditions for providence to operate. What makes this even more impressive is that Gandalf could never fully explain this plan to anyone. How do you explain to someone that your plan depends on them making the right choice when the time comes? How do you tell Frodo, my plan is for you to voluntarily sacrifice yourself to save the world, without sounding like a manipulator? Gandalf's genius lay in creating conditions for people to make the right choices for their own reasons, not because he convinced them to do so. And here's perhaps the deepest aspect of Gandalf's plan he was working with, the very principles that govern Tolkien's creation. In the Silmarillion, we learn that Eru Ilúvatar allows his creatures to make free choices, but he incorporates those choices into his greater music. Gandalf's plan was aligned with this fundamental principle. He created opportunities for good to be freely chosen, and then trusted that those choices would align with the greater will. This explains some of the most mysterious moments in the story. Why did Gandalf insist so much that Bilbo leave the ring to Frodo, even knowing the dangers? Because he needed the decision to be voluntary. Why didn't he immediately reveal that the ring was the One Ring? Because he needed time to prepare the right conditions. Why didn't he simply take the ring and destroy it himself? Because that would have corrupted the very plan. He knew it could only be destroyed by someone who chose to give up power voluntarily. Most fascinating is that even when Gandalf dies fighting the Balrog, this is part of the plan, not his specific plan, but the greater plan in which he was participating. His death and resurrection as Gandalf the White wasn't accident. It was necessary, so he could play his final role in the war without violating the rules governing the Valar's interference in Middle-earth. When we look at the War of the Ring from this perspective, we see it wasn't simply a battle between good and evil. It was the execution of a plan that depended on cooperation between wisdom, goodness, free will, and providence. Gandalf didn't win the war through power or cunning. He won it by creating conditions for the very nature of good to manifest itself. And perhaps that's what makes The Lord of the Rings so powerful as a story. It's not just about heroes defeating villains. It's about how true wisdom sometimes means trusting things you cannot control, and how the deepest plans are those that work with people's nature, not against it. So returning to the original question, why did Gandalf never fully reveal his plan? Because revealing the plan would have destroyed the plan. Its power lay precisely in being executed through free and genuine choices, not through manipulation or coercion. And that, perhaps, is the deepest lesson of the entire story, that the best plans are those that create space for people to be their best selves, not those that force them to be. If you enjoyed this analysis and want to see more videos exploring the deeper aspects of Middle-earth, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments what other hidden aspect of Tolkien's work you'd like me to explore. There's much more happening behind the scenes of this story than appears on the surface, and I can't wait to share these discoveries with you. Until next time.